This program is brought to you by the Reeves Law Firm, www.reevesfirm.com.
In the know.
Good evening, everyone.
In the know. Tony Reeves, fire. Following the news in any way, shape, or form. No shortage of things to talk about. What does it mean? What will it bring? Is this a reality we simply have to accept? Tony Reeves, fire. Tony Reeves.
Let's go ahead and get started.
Okay, here's a tough situation, and I'm going to just go ahead and say this blunt. If you're already receiving disability benefits and you're in the process of going through a continuing disability review, finding an attorney may be really, really tough. I know I may have talked about this in other videos, but I wanted to talk to you about it again because I've gotten this pop up a few other times. So here's the situation that typically falls out. You had a disability, you've gone through the disability process previously. You had an attorney at the time. The attorney was able to assist you in getting disability benefits. Congratulations to you. A few years later, you find yourself now receiving notification from the Social Security Administration that you are going under a continuing disability review. Now, they may not say it nice and neat like that. It may be just telling you that we're in the process of reviewing your case to determine whether you're still disabled. That's what we call a CDR. So now you're in this unfortunately magical position of trying to decide, what should I do? Should I reach out to an attorney? Should I try to do this on my own? Or even the worst part, the review has occurred and they've determined that you're not disabled and you're having a hard time finding an attorney. So let's talk about each step along the way. Okay. Excuse me. Joys and pleasure. Gotta love it. All right. So here's the first thing that happens. You get the letter in the mail letting you know you're undergoing a review. And you now have to decide, do you need to hire an attorney? Here's the thing that you need to understand. The Social Security regulations are very specific about how attorneys and representatives get paid. We have to get permission from the federal government to get paid for anything. So like, for instance, when you were going through your initial process, we had to submit the fee contract to the Social Security Administration. And if we helped you win your case, the Social Security Administration, if they approved that fee contract, then we would get paid. When you're getting benefits, it's a little different, because what happens is that there is no retroactive back pay to get. You're still getting benefits. So that means in order for a representative like myself to get paid, we literally would need for you to pay us directly. Now, some people will say, well, what about, we can't get Social Security can we just allocate Social Security to pay? No, you can't. As long as you're receiving disability benefits, there's no money to earmark. The money is yours. So what happens is that if you go to an attorney and you have some attorney tell you like, well, if you want me to just be with you during the whole continuing disability review process in the event that you get denied, I'm going to require a retainer. And most people kind of back it up and say, well, wait a minute, you didn't ask for one before. The reason why, and I've said this in other videos, is that Social Security does not withhold money, your back pay, to pay your attorney like they did before when you weren't getting anything. Now you're getting something, so you can do that. And the other part is they can't spend it right away. What has to happen is that any monies that they have to actually put it into a trust account and then ask permission from the Social Security Administration to take out that money for the work they did for you. So here's the funky part. So during this disability review process, you haven't been denied yet. This is the first example. You haven't been denied yet. Okay? Haven't been denied yet. Yet you want the security of having an attorney or a representative involved with you. You're going to probably have to pay them during that process. I'm just telling you that in advance. So now we've gone through that, and you say to yourself, well, maybe I can go through this without a representative. You're well within your rights to do so. All of a sudden, you get denied. Well, what happens now? Well, you got two options. Well, a couple of scenarios, but they all kind of roll together. First, you have to make a decision. Do you want to keep the benefits? First of all, do you want to appeal? That's the easiest question. The second thing is, if you do want to appeal, do you want to continue receiving benefits during the disability review process? That's a big question that has to be answered. Why? Well, if you say no, then you're back in the contingency fee arrangement because you're not getting any money. So what happens is that if you hire an attorney, then the attorney just basically represents you like they did before. They get you to sign a fee contract that basically says, I get a percentage of your retroactive back pay, which is basically from the date your benefits are completely turned off to the date they're able to get you the benefits turned back on again, 25% or $6,000, whichever is less, and then the whole cap thing and everything like that. But that's a nice, straight, clean way. The reality is that most people elect to keep their benefits going during the process. Then you know what happens there? You go back to that same scenario that I talked about in terms of you being responsible for paying for them. Now, every rep is different. Every rep has a different retainer amount. Every rep has a different payment arrangement, whether they want it all up front, whether they will all take it in terms of monthly payments, whether they'll take a payment for somebody else. Everybody's a little different. But if you have elected to keep your benefits going during the disability process, and for those of you, most of the disability process really for purposes of keeping those benefits going is that usually that first appeal, that reconsideration appeal, and then all the way up to a judge. That window, and I always tell people, that window, if you keep the benefits going, you can use that as money. You can you typically are permitted the ability to keep those benefits going. You can use that money to pay your attorney again, or your representative. Again, remember that money is going to be put in trust until they actually get you a favorable outcome. You then ask the magical question, well, what happens if I get that denied by a judge? You owe that money back to the government. Your rep owes the money back to you because technically that's money you shouldn't have been receiving, because Social Security affirmed the fact that you were never disabled from that point forward. Can you keep appealing? Absolutely. Just keep in mind that. I always tell people, keep in mind that if by some reason Social Security determines that, later on down the process that you are no longer disabled and you were elected to keep disability benefits during the process, be prepared to pay them back or be prepared to get hit with an overpayment. So just know that. So some of you say, well, what's the third scenario, Attorney Reeves? Third scenario is that you go through all that and then you get up to a particular point and you go to a judge denies you. Can you keep appealing further? Yes. Well, what happens with your representative? It depends on the rep. The rep can continue to represent you if they want to. What ends up happening is that in this instance, the fee that they may have received in their retainer, technically they should be giving that back. There may be representatives who disagree with me in terms of that interpretation, but the reality is that this is money you weren't supposed to get, so that means that's money that you didn't really have to pay them. So you got to give the money back to them, and then it's kind of a straight contingency fee at that particular point, to a degree. Now keep in mind this, because at this particular point, there's that window going forward. You're going to the appeals council level, and that's going to be about 1.5 years. So you've got that window. You still have the overpayment issue that you're dealing with because you got to pay the government back. But it makes it a little cleaner for the representative because this way there's no money in trust and they can represent you in a different manner, because they have to file a fee petition if they win your case regardless, depending on how much money is set aside to pay the attorney. Let's just say this for those of you who are like, my head is truly spinning, Attorney Reeves, you told me a lot. What do I do? When you go through a continuing disability review, you have a couple of questions you need to ask yourself, but the biggest question you really need to ask is, do you feel comfortable enough to doing it on your own? If you don't, then you need to speak to a representative, whether it be an attorney or a non-attorney rep, and see if there's any type of arrangement that you can work out that would allow them to represent you so that you're not going through this process by yourself. Tune in next week, everyone, and we will talk about how to survive the disability process 2016. For those of you who remember, I did this How to Survive the Disability Process before. We're going to talk about ways to do that now in 2016. So make sure you check us out next week again here on Q&A, Social Security Disability Today.